this video, we will be discussing about convolution neural networks, a type of artificial neural networks. This is also called in short CNN or ConNets. The general history of artificial neural networks, how a deep neural network is formed, what's the similarity of the CNN, why CNN, and how to build a CNN, and finally the transfer learning. The evaluation of ANN, it's quite old, say from 1940 to 1950. The inspiration is the human brain trying to mimic how the brain works, and the electronic brain was created with the thresholded logic unit which mimic a neuron. Then 1959, Frank Rosenberg is a pioneer to the modern neural network called Perceptron, which is having a learning procedure that probably converts. So it was used only for the binary classification. 1969, Marvin Minsky, one of the father of AI, along with Seymour Papert, they ended the idea of neural network due to its limitation in learning a non-linear function called XOR. Then the AI winter sets in because there is no solution to this non-linear function. How to learn a non-linear function? In 1986, the neural network with the hidden layers and the learning through back propagation was invented, and then the CNN came into picture for the digit recognition, but it was not scalable to larger problems. 1990s, support vector machine neural networks moved to backstage again. Then the neural networks and deep learning picked up, and it became very popular from 2006 onwards. And types of neural networks and the tasks performed. There are many variants of neural networks came into picture. This is the pictorial description, the timeline from 1940s to 2000 and beyond. So we can see the starting point was mimicking the brain, which is the basic neuron, that is the electronic brain, then perceptron, then the problem with the XOR problem, that is the non-linear function, it is not able to learn. Solution is the multi-layered perceptron and using the back propagation learning, and then we came to this era where deep neural network became very popular. Initial model of ANN is where no learning was there, that is McCall-Spitz model, and the perceptron used Hebb learning. These are the initial models of artificial neural network. Perceptron used the Hebb's learning. The step by step is first the perceptron receives input x1 to xn. In connection for each of these inputs has weights mentioned as w1 to wn, which is having a real number in the range of 0 to 1. They are initialized and updated if required. Third, the threshold unit sums these weighted inputs. And fourth step, there is an activation function which triggers binary activation 0 or 1 if the sum exceeds the threshold value t. So this summation of weighted sum, that is sigma wixi for all the I, if it is greater than t, then a signal is sent as an output, otherwise no signal is sent. This is how the perceptron works. Simple learning machine, Rosenbladt's perceptron. It represents a linear separator for the input space. which works very well with and or. But for the XOR, a linear separator doesn't work. Instead, an ellipse is able to separate the 1 and the 0. Perceptron learning algorithm for the classification. So here the convergence of the perceptron is only guaranteed if the two classes are linearly separable, and if they are not separable, then the number of there will be many misclassifications. This is an iterative process, and maximum number of processes passed through the training data set to get a decision of the class. The perceptron training or the learning rule occurs when that error is made and the weights are changed according to the equation W of t plus 1 is equal to W of t plus eta bracket d minus y into x. Eta is the learning rate and d is the target value, y is the perceptron output, and x is the input value. T is the timestamp, t plus 1 is the next in the future, t plus 1 is the time. The performance, this equation of W of t plus 1 is equal to W of t plus eta d minus y of x is weight updation rule. For any machine learning, we have to measure the performance. The performance is the cost function. We use sum squared error, which needs to be minimized, and it is computed over all the input-output pairs in the training set. So E is equal to half summation of I equal to 1 to P mod of y minus d the whole square for all the input I equal to 1 to P. This is an example of feed-forward artificial neural network where you have having inputs, hidden layer, and the outputs. The arrows are all feed forward, which goes from left to right. In this MLP feed forward, there is a back propagation of errors which helps in learning. Due to the back propagation of errors, the weights are updated. So in the feed forward, the information is feed forward and the errors are back propagated. Coming to multi-layer perceptron, when we add a hidden layer, the model is able to learn non-linear problems. If we see the perceptron structure with one layer, not able to solve the XOR problem. When we are having two layers, then with the two layers, we are able to segregate the B with A by having two lines. When we are having three layers with the hidden layer, now we are able to form a shape in such a manner that we are able to separate the B. So the complexity of the problem can be handled efficiently by adding one or more layers. Let us see the case study where the machine learning which uses the neural network architecture has been used in a domain of renewable energy resources. So here in this, the photovoltaic PV electricity generation is forecasted, it's being predicted, and the inputs are the historical PV value, temperature, humidity, wind speed, and the cloud. And there is a hidden layer with 20 neurons. So this particular paper is the PV forecasted, which accurately forecasts the PV output over the spectrum of forecast horizon at different chronological scales. Next case study in the domain of environment sciences, where a neural network called multi-layer perceptron is used to predict the magnitude of the earthquakes. There are four classes A, B, C, and D. This multi-layer perceptron neural network consists of three main layers: input layer, hidden layer, and the output layer. Another type of neural network is feedback neural network, which is also called recurrent or interactive networks, which can have signals traveling in both direction. Information passes from left to right and from right to left. and it introduces loops in the network. It's powerful, dynamic, and has a memory concept. Examples of such neural network are called hop-filled network, used for associative memory to recall the stored pattern. Another type of network which uses this feedback is coherence self-organizing maps, which is unsupervised learning and discovers the underlying structure of the data. Some of the quiz can be performed classification tasks using McCall-Pitts model, and why Rosenblatt's Perceptron has failed. The third one is how to learn non-linear functions. So let's give it a thought. So the answer is it's not possible because McCall-Pitts model does not have any learning algorithm. Perceptron is a linear one and could not train the XOR function, which is non-linear. Addition layers provide the network with the ability to learn non-linear functions. We have heard a lot about the deep learning. So what is a deep learning? Deep learning is a subfield of machine learning that puts an emphasis on learning successive layers of increasingly meaningful representations. These layered representations are learned via models called neural networks, and they are stacked at the top of each other. There are different purposes for each of these layers, for each of the input, hidden, and the output level. Convolutional layer is very important and it is used in the models when we work with image data. Recurrent layers are used when we are working with time series data. Fully connected layers fully connects each input to the output within its layers. As the model learns, the weights of all the connections are updated, optimized, and the input data maps to the correct output prediction class. This is an example of a multi-layer neural network where the activation function is sigmoid neural network, which is used where it is having 784 input neurons, 16 hidden neurons, and 10 output neurons. So what is ANN, CNN diagrammatically? The top diagram shows a 3-layer artificial neural network, whereas the bottom diagram shows 3D volumes of neurons. For images, regular neural networks don't scale well to the full images, and a fully connected neuron in the first hidden layer of the neural network will have 3072 weights, considering an image of 32 into 32 into 3, and image size of 200 into 203 would lead to neurons with 1,20,000 weights. Fully connectivity is wasteful and a huge number of parameters are there which results in overfitting. This is one of the standard state-of-art classification artificial convolution neural network, where we are having first half as feature learning and the second half as classification. The feature learning consists of convolution, ReLU, pooling, convolution, ReLU, again pooling. The classification consists of flattened layers, fully connected layers, and finally a softmax, which gives the probability distribution for each of these classes. The CNN versus ANN, we are having this learnable weights and biases, and we are having a loss function on the last connected layer, which is also called the last fully connected layer is the output layer, and the classification represents the class scores. So how to build a CNN? We need sequence of layers, and the convolutional architecture consists of convolution layer, pooling layer, rectified linear units, activation function used in CNN also called piecewise linear function, and then there is a fully connected layer. When compiling a model, the Keras asks to specify the loss function and the optimizer function. The optimizer function used for quickly learning the model is gradient descent. After compiling, we have to mention the loss function, optimizer function, and the performance metrics. Then model.fit generator will train the model. Finally, we evaluate the model using the evaluate function. The data is tested or evaluated on the test data set, and the training is done on the training part of the data set along with the validation data set. This is called convolution operation, which is applied on a kernel. In the image, kernels are applied. So the kernel can be of a size 3 by 3. In this case, it is 3 by 3. When it is applied to the image of 5 by 5, we get the convolved feature, which is a dot product operation takes place between the image and the kernel, and the convolved feature gets generated. So depending on the filter, the convolved image can be the same identity metrics or edge detection or sharpening of the image or box blur or Gaussian blur. You see this convolution layer, the CNN architecture with 96 filters were used of size 11 into 11 into 3. Each one is shared by 55 into 55 neurons in one depth slice. This is a kernels in deep learning networks, which highlights the features with convolution operation. Usually these convolution neural networks have stacks of convolution or called convolution series, which helps in learning different characteristics in an image. The kernels are often used for blurring, edge detection, sharpening. Non-highlighted elements are discarded from each feature map, leaving only the features of interest and reducing the number of learned parameters and decreasing the computational cost. This is called a max pool layer. The demo of the max pool layer, the 4 red boxes, max is 20. So in right hand side, pink box is replaced with the maximum value 20. Similarly, yellow color right hand side topmost is replaced by 30. Bottom you can see here it is 112, and the green corner is the 37. So non-highlighted elements are discarded from each feature map, leaving only the features of interest. There is a pool layer. It downsamples the volume specially and also controls the overfitting. So the pooling layer, it downsampled from 224 to 112 into 112. Next comes the activation function. The activation function, in this example, it has shown the piecewise linear function. One of the popular activation function is ReLU function. This slide tells about why the layers, what are the layers and why the layers, what is the significance between these layers. Input layer, then hidden layer is located between input and output, whereas output layer is responsible for producing the final result. In input layers, the function used is image input layer, sequence input layer. These are the learnable layers, which is of Python we can say convolution 2D layer, transport 2D layer, fully connected layer, LSTM layer. LSTM is for the feedback or recurring neural network. Then the activation layers, the activation function like ReLU, the leaky ReLU, clipped ReLU layer are the functions which are used in these layers to learn the non-linearity or the patterns found in the data. The ReLU layer is also very popular because it's very easy and the operation is very easy. It's like a threshold operation applied to the element and where any value less than 0 is set to 0 and otherwise it is set to 1. This is normalization and dropout layers. So it normalizes the each input channel used for the batch normalization. It speeds up the training and also it reduces the sensitivity to the network initialization. These are the pooling layers where we downsample by using average operation or max pooling. The combination layers, addition layer and depth concatenation layer, and the output layers consist of the softmax layer, classification layer or the regression layer. These layers also hold the name of the loss function, which the model tries to minimize. And for regression task, regression layer is used. For classification task, classification layer is used. Softmax is used for classification, which is probabilistic output. This diagram shows the activation function. In the left hand side, it is for binary classification, where we have two classes. The activation function used at the output layer is sigmoid. In the right hand side, when we have multi-class classification, more than one classes, the activation function used is softmax. It gives the probability value for each of these classes. The output layer also has to mention the loss function. For binary classification, it is binary cross entropy, and for multi-class classification, it is called the value given for the loss function is categorical cross entropy. This is a sample code. The reference has been mentioned here, which does the digit classification for the CNN, where we can see this is a sequential model and we add the stacks of convolution layer 1, 2, 3, and for each convolution layer we mention the batch normalization, the activation function, max pooling layer. So there are 4 convolution layers. Finally, after this we are having 2 fully connected layers. So this is what is the model formed. This is CNN model formed generated for the digit classification. Usually the convenient architectures format is similar to this: input, and then there are convolution, series of convolution layer with the ReLU as the activation function. After that it goes to downsampling by pool layers. This whole thing of con to ReLU into n to pool is again created as series, say M series, and finally we have K series of fully connected with ReLU activation function, whose output is given to at last the fully connected layer. So usually the thumb rule is n is greater than equal to 0 or n is less than equal to 3. So this initial convolution layers of series of convolution layer is less than equal to 3. The whole sequence m is greater than equal to 0, k greater than equal to 0, and k is also less than 3. The popular content architectures, the state of art which is used are LENet, AlexNet, ZFNet, GoogleNet, VGGNet and ResNet. Transfer learning is a research problem in which machine learning models are created and they are trained, and finally that machine learning model can be used directly for testing without further training. So this knowledge gained and stored in the model can be used by applying the model for the classification tasks. This is called this pre-trained model: VGG16, VGG19, ResNet 50, inception, V3 and exception. They can be imported. The models will have all the weights, the proper weights, and directly it can be used for testing or for classification. Next we will be seeing the hands-on session where we'll do the transfer learning using the Keras library. Also, we'll see the objective of the VGG 16, where pre-trained networks, it is one of the pre-trained networks which is capable of recognizing 1000 different object categories. So if we give any one of the object, directly the model will be able to accurately classify the given input object. Thank you.